When we first started the show, I really thought we were doing a show about building cars and motorcycles for people. It evolved into a show about people and their stories.
For nearly a decade, Counting Cars wasn't just another reality show, it was a cultural phenomenon. At the center of it all stood Danny the Count Koker, the charismatic shop owner with a deep love for classic cars, rock and roll, and everything vintage. Week after week, millions tuned in to watch him and his team at Count's Customs restore forgotten machines into jaw-dropping masterpieces. Fans loved the over-the-top builds, the crazy finds, and most of all, Danny's larger-than-life personality. But then, almost as suddenly as it had exploded onto the scene, Counting Cars was gone. The engines stopped running, the cameras went dark, and for years, viewers were left in the dark about why. Rumors swirled. Was it money? Drama behind the scenes? Or the network pulling the plug without warning? Fans speculated endlessly, but Danny himself remained largely silent, avoiding direct answers and letting mystery surround the show's disappearance. Until now, at 61 years old, Danny Koker has finally broken his silence. And what he revealed about the downfall of Counting Cars is not only shocking, it's heartbreaking. It's a story of betrayal, burnout, financial battles, and a changing TV industry that no longer had room for the kind of show he built with his own hands. What was once a dream come true turned into a nightmare that left scars far deeper than anyone realized. This is the untold truth of why Counting Cars really ended, and why Danny Koker has decided it's finally time to speak out. Long before television crews rolled their cameras inside Count's Customs, Danny Koker was already a legend in the making. Born into a family of entertainers and musicians, Danny inherited both showmanship and passion at an early age. While his family performed on stage, young Danny found himself drawn to the roar of engines and the gleam of chrome. Cars weren't just machines to him. They were art, history, and living pieces of culture. By the time he settled in Las Vegas, he had turned this passion into something bigger than just a hobby, a way of life. Count's Customs, his custom car and motorcycle shop, became a local hotspot long before Counting Cars ever aired. In Vegas, a city built on spectacle, Danny's creations stood out. He wasn't restoring cars just to make them drivable again. He was resurrecting them, giving each machine a unique personality. Word spread quickly, and his shop became a destination for car lovers, collectors, and even celebrities. Television producers took notice after Danny appeared on Pawn Stars, showcasing his expertise whenever a rare car rolled into the gold and silver pawn shop. His charisma and encyclopedic knowledge of vehicles made him unforgettable. And it wasn't long before History Channel realized they had something special on their hands. In 2012, Counting Cars premiered, giving Danny his own platform to share his passion with the world. The show was an instant hit. Unlike other reality series that thrived on contrived drama, Counting Cars felt authentic. Viewers weren't just watching builds. They were watching Danny's dream unfold on screen. His genuine excitement over a classic car barn find or his relentless drive to push creative limits gave the series an energy few could match. And it wasn't just Danny, the whole crew. From Kevin to Horny Mike to Ryan became familiar faces, each adding flavor to the show's success. For years, Counting Cars dominated reality TV, pulling in millions of viewers per episode. Fans admired Danny's love for vintage rides, his rock and roll style, and the sense of family that seemed to run through his shop. Beyond the flashy paint jobs and roaring engines, the series carried heart. It was about loyalty, hard work, and the belief that passion could build not just cars, but community. Yet, behind the success, the seeds of future problems were already being planted. The demanding filming schedules, the pressure to constantly top previous builds, and the financial strain of operating a high-end custom shop all began to pile up. What looked effortless on television was, in reality, a grind that pushed Danny and his crew to their limits. Still, in those early years, the highs outweighed the lows. Danny relished the spotlight, fans flocked to his shop, and Counting Cars seemed unstoppable. The Count had built his kingdom, not just in Vegas, but across the globe, and audiences believed the ride would last forever. Nobody imagined that the show, which once seemed like a roaring engine at full speed, would one day sputter and stall. As Danny Koker now admits, the rise was dazzling, but it came with a cost he couldn't ignore forever. And when the cracks finally started to show, they would set off a chain of events that no amount of horsepower could fix. On the surface, Counting Cars was cruising at top speed, a polished machine with no signs of slowing down. But as Danny Koker would later reveal, things weren't nearly as smooth behind the scenes. The pressure of turning out hit episodes season after season weighed heavily on both him and his crew. What fans saw as entertainment was, in reality, a relentless grind that demanded constant innovation, flawless execution, and the kind of perfection that simply wasn't sustainable. Each episode required not just one jaw-dropping car build, but often several, each more ambitious than the last. Deadlines were brutal. The shop wasn't just running for television. It was a real business, with real bills, real employees, and real customers. Balancing the needs of the show with the demands of running Count's customs was like walking a tightrope. Danny often worked late into the night, not just sketching designs but worrying about payroll, parts costs, and the enormous weight of expectations. And then came the financial strain. Viewers often assumed that the network was footing the bill for every project, but the reality was far more complicated. Many of the costs fell on Danny's shoulders, and when projects ran over budget, it hit his shop directly. What was supposed to be a dream platform to showcase his work often became a financial trap, one that forced him to dig deeper into his own pockets to keep the wheels turning. On top of that, the realities of television politics added fuel to the fire. Networks wanted bigger drama, flashier builds, and higher ratings, while Danny fought to keep the show true to his vision, authentic, focused on the cars, and rooted in his passion. The tension between artistic integrity and corporate demands created cracks in the once tight operation. Even among the crew, stress started to show. Friendships that once felt like family bonds were tested under the weight of constant filming schedules and the pressure to deliver. Mistakes that might have been small in a normal shop suddenly became magnified when cameras were rolling. And though Danny worked tirelessly to protect his team, he couldn't shield them, or himself, from the growing strain. Adding to the turmoil were the rumors that began to swirl in the press. Allegations of money troubles, lawsuits, and conflicts within the team started making headlines. While not every story was true, the constant speculation chipped away at the image of unity and strength the show had built. Danny remained quiet publicly, never one to air dirty laundry. But the silence only fueled curiosity and, in some cases, mistrust. Then came one of the most damaging blows, allegations of embezzlement involving a trusted employee. Though Danny himself wasn't accused, the scandal tainted the shop's reputation and cast a shadow over the show. For someone who prided himself on loyalty and integrity, it was a betrayal that cut deeply. The Count's kingdom suddenly looked fragile, and the foundation of trust it had been built on felt shaken. Behind closed doors, Danny admits now, he began to question how much longer he could keep going. The cars still thrilled him, the fans still loved him, but the weight of carrying it all was becoming too much. He started to see that the empire he had built was not just a dream realized, it was also a burden that was slowly breaking him down. The shiny chrome exterior of Counting Cars was beginning to crack, and what lay beneath was far less glamorous. Danny Koker was facing a reality he never wanted to admit. Even the most powerful engines eventually wear out. For fans, the end of Counting Cars felt abrupt, almost like a car hitting the brakes in the middle of a highway. One season it was there, the next it was gone, without the kind of farewell most successful shows receive. For Danny Koker, however, the stop wasn't sudden. It was a slow buildup of problems that finally reached a point where continuing simply wasn't possible. The History Channel, which had once poured resources into promoting the series, began shifting its priorities. New shows, new trends, and a changing television landscape meant that Counting Cars no longer had the same spotlight. Ratings, while still strong, weren't what they once were, and in the world of TV executives, numbers were everything. Danny would later reveal that the network wanted more scripted drama, more personality clashes, and less focus on the cars themselves. For a man whose entire life revolved around authenticity and passion, those demands were non-negotiable. But network politics were only part of the problem. The behind-the-scenes financial pressures that had been building for years finally came crashing down. Costs had skyrocketed, schedules became unbearable, and the business side of Count's Customs was taking hits left and right. Danny could no longer pour endless amounts of money into builds for the sake of television, not when it threatened the survival of the shop he had built long before cameras ever arrived. The breaking point, however, wasn't just about money or ratings. It was personal. Danny's health and peace of mind were suffering under the non-stop grind of filming, running a shop at full throttle while also living in front of. Cameras took a toll on him physically and emotionally. At 61, he realized he couldn't keep burning the candle at both ends. The Count had given everything to his craft, but the price was becoming too high. When the decision finally came down to end the series, it wasn't delivered with fanfare or public explanation. The cameras simply stopped rolling, the production team packed up, and the crew went back to focusing on the shop. Fans were left with unanswered questions, wondering why their favorite car show had disappeared without warning. For Danny, it was one of the hardest decisions of his life. Counting Cars had given him fame, opportunity, and a platform to share his passion with millions. But it had also brought strain, betrayal, and heartbreak. The silence that followed was not because he didn't care about his fans. It was because the wounds were too fresh, the disappointment too heavy. Sometimes, he later admitted, it was easier to say nothing than to relive the pain of explaining why something he loved so much had to end. The end of the show marked more than just the cancellation of a television program. It was the end of an era. For nearly a decade, Counting Cars had been part of the daily lives of car enthusiasts around the world. Its disappearance left a hole that no other series quite managed to fill. Danny's revelation years later confirmed what many suspected. The decision wasn't just business. It was the result of pressures, betrayals, and heartbreak that cut deeper than any fan could have imagined. When the roar of engines on Counting Cars finally faded, Danny Koker found himself at a crossroads. For nearly 10 years, his life had been defined by television schedules, production meetings, and the constant need to outdo himself for millions of viewers. The silence that followed was strange, almost unsettling. But for the first time in years, he had space to breathe, reflect, and figure out who he was without the cameras. Count's Customs never disappeared. The shop remained open, still buzzing with the sound of grinders, spray guns, and revving engines. Loyal fans still made the pilgrimage to Las Vegas to catch a glimpse of the iconic garage, hoping for a chance encounter with the Count himself. The brand Danny built was bigger than television, and in many ways, the cancellation of the show freed him to focus on what mattered most, creating cars without the constant shadow of a production crew. Yet, the scars from the show's end remained. Danny admitted that walking away from Counting Cars felt like losing a part of his identity. For years, he had poured everything into making it work, only to see it collapse under forces beyond his control. The financial battles, the betrayal of trust, and the network's shifting demands left him questioning whether it had all been worth it. But over time, he realized that the show, while painful in its ending, had given him something priceless: a legacy. Danny's passion for music also resurfaced. Long before television, he had been a performer, and after the show ended, he leaned more heavily into that side of his life. Whether it was live shows, studio recordings, or working with other artists, music gave him an outlet that wasn't tied to ratings or sponsorship deals. It was pure, creative, and deeply personal. A reminder that his talents stretched far beyond custom cars. As he reached his 60s, Danny also became more reflective about his health and well-being. Years of non-stop work had taken their toll, and the pace of television had only worsened it. Away from the cameras, he found time to prioritize rest, family, and balance, things that had been nearly impossible during the peak of Counting Cars. For fans, hearing him speak openly about the toll it all took was sobering. The man who had seemed larger than life was human after all, carrying the weight of exhaustion, stress, and the pain of difficult choices. What makes Danny's story resonate so deeply is the honesty with which he finally broke his silence. At 61, he wasn't chasing fame or trying to relaunch a canceled show. He was simply telling the truth about what happened, no matter how unflattering or heartbreaking it might be. In doing so, he gave closure to millions of fans who had wondered for years why the engines of Counting Cars went quiet. Today, Danny Koker stands not as just the Count from television, but as a man who lived through the highs and lows of reality stardom and came out the other side still doing what he loves. His shop remains a landmark, his reputation as a car enthusiast is unshaken, and his story serves as a reminder that sometimes endings, no matter how painful, make way for new beginnings. The cancellation of Counting Cars may have been bad, heartbreaking even, but Danny's journey didn't end with it. In truth, it gave him the chance to strip away the noise, focus on his passions, and live life on his own terms. And for a man who has always valued authenticity above everything else, that may be the greatest victory of all.